Welcome to Main Street Podcast, an opportunity to talk to Idaho's elected leaders about the issues that matter to you. It is the Idaho Main Street Podcast. This is Brennan Summers here. I keep getting in trouble for not saying my name, but nobody cares who I am. It's always the guest we're here for. So we are lucky enough to be here with the good senator out of District 35, Senator Mark Harris. Mark, how are you?
I'm good. I think to be here. Thank you.
The most important question we have to ask is, did you get the cows fed before you came in today?
Didn't have to feed them, not yet.
You haven't fed them yet? You feed them later in the day?
Well, the snow level hasn't come down quite to hit us yet, so
they're all out. Just
we're watching it.
You're not throwing any hay down for them. They're good.
Not yet. Hay's too expensive. Well, not this year, but it's a cost that we don't want to blow right away.
Sure. You got to save that because you have some pretty harsh winters where you're at.
We do, yeah.
Yeah. I'm excited. We're going to talk a little bit about where you're from and what you're doing, but we have a few things in common. We both went to Utah State and got political science.
Oh, awesome.
Degrees. Yeah, go Aggies. Are you a true Aggie?
I am not.
You're not a true Aggie.
I'm not. Well, are you?
That's a very personal question. I do the questions here, Mark.
Okay.
You and Cheryl need to get down to Logan to become true Aggies.
I know. I keep telling her that. She finds some excuse not to go.
Well, we've got a lot of people right now that are Googling
what a true Aggie is.
Yeah. Utah State owes us for that one. But when I was little, my dad was on the city council in Yukon, which is in your district. And so I would go to city council meetings with him. And I'd go to these Lincoln days, and it opened me up to this whole different world. You had a similar experience that got you involved in public service and getting involved in your community. Maybe talk a little bit about what your grandparents and your parents did to help you get to be a senator now.
Sure. So my great-grandpa was actually a representative, and when Idaho was just a newly formed state. And I'd kind of always knew that, but really didn't pay much attention to it. My dad is actually the one that got me involved in politics. As I was a little kid, he would spray weeds with his pickup, and I would have to start the pickup going, driving it when I was real little. And so he could start the sprayer and get it going, then he would run and jump in the cab, and we'd take off. He would always listen to the radio and Paul Harvey and the news. The news was big to him. Mm-hmm. And I could always remember him griping about Jimmy Carter. He did not like Jimmy Carter. And then when Ronald Reagan became the president, that was the happiest day of his life.
Really?
And that's when I started paying attention to what was going on mostly on the national level, because that was what was sexy at the time. But yeah, that's kind of what got me going. Both him and Mom were involved in the Bear Lake County Republican Party, and so I started going to Republican conventions at a real early age.
And you caught the bug.
I caught the bug.
Well, I'm sure Dad didn't love filling up that truck during the Jimmy Carter era.
He didn't.
Right.
He didn't.
Oh, that's such a fun anecdote. Now, what was great-grandpa's name?
My great-grandpa's name was William McGee.
William McGee. Okay.
William McGee Harris.
So you've got a rich history of serving Idaho. Do you know what kind of legislator he was? If he was a bomb thrower, or if he was...
He was known as the hard-headed gentleman from Bonneville County.
Oh, really? A title that you've managed to shake off. Yeah, that's all right. Now, you're not from Bonneville County. You're out near Soda Springs, and you describe it as it's an area called 8 Mile.
Right.
That's between Soda and Georgetown.
Right.
Which is funny because most people hear 8 Mile, and I don't know if you're familiar with Detroit, but 8 Mile is a portion where the rapper Eminem grew up.
Oh, no, I'm not. No.
And it is notorious for I won't go into the details, but for crime and things like that.
Uh-huh.
Got to be very different than the 8 Mile you live in.
Oh, yes. There's no crime in 8 Mile where I'm from.
Yeah. What's it like out there?
It's a good place to raise kids. That's where I grew up and was raised. The winters are harsh, as you mentioned. The springs are beautiful but short, and the summers are hot. Not as hot as other places, but the falls are beautiful.
Yeah. And you're right there. And Soda Springs, that's the closest city where you can.
Yeah, we're 8 miles south of Soda Springs, coincidentally.
That's the name. There we go. We're figuring this out. I'm a slow learner, but I'll get there. Now, you've got an interesting district, though, because there you are embedded in the heart of 8 Mile right there by Soda. But your district runs all the way up to Tetonia along the Wyoming border. comes down. You go through Driggs all the way through Swan Valley, Palisades, even over to Yukon, my old stomping grounds. And then it cuts all the way down straight to Bear Lake at the Utah border.
And then goes to McCammon and Ingham.
Yeah, that's got to be one of the most wild districts drawn up.
We kind of kid it was the district that was made up after all the other districts were formed. That they just kind of hodgepodged that one together. But it's an interesting district, but it's full of good people.
Different people,
but good people.
So you've said before that as an elected leader, you're going to represent everybody, whether they voted for you or not, whether they agree with you or not.
That's my job.
That's your job. Man, there's different people that exist in Yukon and different people that exist in Driggs and all over the place. How when you go and vote, or how when you go and sit on your committees and write legislation, do you keep all those different views in mind?
It's difficult. As you can imagine, the constituency in Driggs is quite a bit different than the constituency in Bear Lake County.
Sure.
I received quite a few emails from Teton County. They're very politically inclined, very politically motivated. But as I sit down and get ready to vote on a certain bill, I have to rely on my principles, common sense, good, what I think will help the majority of the district. And then I vote that way. And if that's what happens.
Sure. Let's talk principles. You've been described as a level-headed legislator, and I practice all morning to make sure I got that right. Level-headed legislator. How is it you've managed to? You've also you've been endorsed by some very conservative organizations for your way to stand up for right to life, or your following of the Constitution and that organization surrounding those type of endorsements. How do you kind of keep this level-headed mentality as a pragmatist and stay very conservative without losing your head over there?
I don't know. It's something that's it doesn't keep me up at night. I do what I think is best, and let the consequences follow. Basically. Usually, if someone disagrees with me or with the way I voted, I'll try to call them and walk them through why I voted the way I did, and usually that will suffice. If it doesn't, they'll say, "Well, we agree to disagree, and we'll try the next time." But I do sincerely try to follow what I think is right, what the Constitution, what I think the Constitution allows us to do, and what will help my constituents, and that's the best I can do.
And we try to humanize the politician on this podcast. We try to take away the power distance of the title. And one thing you've done that I think it's important for listeners to understand is your phone number's out there. Right. And you've encouraged people to call. Right. We were talking before about how you'll receive a lot of calls on certain issues. And when they call, oftentimes if you're out and about, your secretary, insert quotations, or so they think, you have a receptionist. It's actually Cheryl, your wife, or your boys that are taking the call.
Right.
That seems, that's going to blow some people's mind that they could literally just call up the home phone of their senator and get the wife or get the senator and leave a message about how they feel. That doesn't seem crazy to you?
No, it doesn't. That seems Idaho to me. Idaho has a part-time legislature. We all have our real jobs when we go home. And I think that is crucial to what Idaho is that we need to keep that part-time legislature mentality. We need to keep that connection with people at home. And I think that's important, to be able to have my constituents call my house and say, "Hey, I've got a problem," and be able to talk to them.
I think it's fantastic.
It's a necessity.
Yeah. So you're still a firm believer. Part of your principles are your constituents, your voters need to be able to reach you, even if they don't agree with you.
Even if they don't agree.
You've had some crazy calls in the past.
I have, and especially on the wolf issue.
Yeah.
We had some wolf legislation a couple of years ago that went through. We had quite a few calls late at night, odd hours of the day, from some very disgruntled people all across the country and the world, in fact. And we finally had to tell the kids, don't answer the phone unless you recognize the number.
Yeah, and he's 208 on it.
Yeah, and we had to kind of calm down on that. But
let's talk about that wolf issue.
Okay.
So congratulations, you were quoted in the New York Times. That's the positive side of it. The negative side of it is they were pretty critical of you regarding this wolf issue.
Yeah.
What was all the fuss about, Senator?
The fuss was an offhand comment that was made in committee about how we, the sponsors of the bill, wanted to kill 90% of the wolves in Idaho. That was the furthest thing from the truth, because if we do that, the wolf will be listed again and we start the process all over again. I mean, we don't want to do that. But the fact remains, by the numbers that the Fish and Game gave us, the wolf population was growing, and it was like 1,550 wolves, if I remember correctly, and our target was way below that. Even with the hunting season that we had, that the Fish and Game had implemented, the population was still growing. And so basically the legislation that we had was to allow year-round trapping on private land. It would allow other people contractors besides government guys to go out and kill the wolves. Anyway, those things were the triggers of the comment of you want to kill 90% of the wolves in Idaho, and that this was the furthest thing from the truth. But that's what riled everybody up.
But you led the legislation that was trying to control this population that was exploding, correct?
Right. My name was on the bill.
Yeah. So there's some people that are new to our state, might be listening, who, wolves are cute creatures to them. They see them from a distance. They read about them in schools. What is it that they need to understand about this species when it comes to the Idaho way of life?
It goes beyond just the wolf itself. The wolves have been killing cattle and livestock, sheep, horses, domestic dogs, several things around the state. And the livestock producers mostly are beside themselves. Their cattle come in way underweight. They come in open, not pregnant.
Oh,
which is a killer in the livestock industry. It's bad. So there's that aspect of it, but also on the wildlife side of it, we're finding the wolves are driving the elk herds down into the lower country. And when the elk come down, they destroy crops in the lower country, hay crops, corn crops, whatever. The elk should be in the mountains. And so there's a compounded problem there with elk depredation where there shouldn't be, plus the added livestock depredation when the wolves will kill them.
And you can speak to this issue because not only do you have a cattle operation that you run with your brothers down there, like we're talking about like 1,000 head. I mean, it's a significant operation. But all your friends and neighbors, that's their way of life as well, right?
That's their way of life.
They're growing hay. They're raising cows. Your experience in ag is unique, right? So you started kind of on the Farm Bureau in the Idaho cattlemen. You served there. And you kind of brought your experience from the field into the policy realm. And then as you've been in the Senate, you've been able to kind of lead out on a lot of these ag issues. Why is it so important that we have elected leaders in Idaho that not only understand agriculture, but their livelihood is agriculture?
That's a good question. Agriculture is a critical part of the Idaho economy. I think it's like 13% of the GDP, but it's just more than that. It's agriculture is it's a way of life. It's a legacy for a lot of these families, and in my view, I need to do everything I can to protect that legacy and that way of life for future generations. And what we're seeing now during this time is a large population growth in the state of Idaho. We're seeing it in our infrastructure, our resources, and our ag land. And it's coming to the point where a beginning farmer, a kid that wants to start a farm, cannot afford to buy land to start a farm. They have to inherit that or have some kind of agreement with their parents to buy it. And so what we're seeing is the loss of the family farm, and that's a threat.
Yeah. Yeah, I have a college roommate down in Utah State who grew up at Bear Lake, went to Bear Lake High School, and he's in that situation right now. He's got a young family, and he wants more than anything to raise cows, to grow crops, and to get in that lifestyle. And culturally, it's more than just the finances that comes in Idaho from our big farms. It's the culture part of it that we've got to protect. So what are some of the issues? You listed some about the growth and the infrastructure and the challenge to keep the family farm. What are some of these big issues that agriculture is facing in Idaho right now that you've got to help with in the Senate?
Well, the big issues, I think, are a lot of the problems come from on the federal level. For example, Waters of the United States, the WOTUS. And that was implemented or introduced in the Obama administration and kind of went away during the Trump years. And then it come back with the Biden administration. The several states attorney generals have filed suit. And as far as I know, that's still pending, but it's the Sackett situation in northern Idaho with their win in the Supreme Court has kind of forced the EPA to go back and relook at that, which is good. The other thing that's floating around out there hovering is what they call the 3030 project, which has been introduced by the Biden administration. Again, it's a global initiative basically to put in reserve 30% of the land and 30% of the water by the year 2030. And that is also a threat to agriculture because, as I said before, our population's growing. We've got to eat. And somebody's got to grow the food, and we have to have places to do that. And there's that issue.
Regulation by the federal government is kind of strangling you. And there's a lot of people in D.C. who they'll put out policy. It sounds like a good idea, but it's very different when it comes down to the guy whose boots are in the dirt.
Yeah, when it hits the ground, it's a problem.
Now, so there are some things thrown down from the federal government that make it a real challenge, and there's some things that just kind of happen. So recently, we saw an invasive mussel species pop up in some Idaho waters. The governor and the Idaho Department of Ag, they wasted no time to do the full court press, try to get rid of this thing. Again, what's the big concern about this invasive species, and why should we all care about a mussel that I can't even pronounce?
The quagga mussel.
Yeah, quagga. There you go.
It comes from Ukraine, I believe, and has infested the Great Lakes. In fact, the only states in the country that hasn't been touched by it are Idaho, Washington, Oregon, Montana, maybe. So we've been trying our best to keep the quagga mussel out. And years ago, the Department of Ag implemented check stations, and everybody's probably seen them on the border, boat check stations. It kind of got the process kind of got stale, and so we revamped it in 2017, I believe, and added some more funds to the stations to add them so they could run longer hours. We've been crossing our fingers, hoping we didn't ever get them, and lo and behold, we did in the Snake River and Twin, as you mentioned.
Just popped up a couple months ago, maybe.
It popped up, and we don't know where they came from, and that's concerning.
I blame the Californians. Well, it's the easiest thing to do, right?
It's the easiest, yeah. But it could have come in an inflatable raft, a rubber duck. I don't know. Yeah. It could have come in anything, and the problem with those are they multiply so fast, and they're so thick that they could potentially cause hundreds of millions of dollars of damage to Idaho's infrastructure, the power generation, irrigation systems. We've seen pictures of them clogging center pivots so bad that the center pivots get heavy and collapse. They just constrict the water flow. They grow on rocks on the beaches and make it so people don't want to go there. It's a bad creature.
That's the bad news. What's the good news?
The good news is as you said, the governor and the Department of Ag, Department of Transportation, Fish and Game, several state agencies, some federal agencies. It was a phenomenal response to when it was discovered that we had it in Twin Falls in the river. The response was terrific, and I think it's something that we'll look back on and try to emulate if we ever get it again. But I have nothing but praise for the Department of Ag and how they reacted to this issue, and what they did is they put a copper compound in the river, chelated, I believe, chelated copper that will stick to stuff. And it was in the water for 90 some odd hours and killed the mussel that they did find. They did find one. Killed the villagers, the little mussels.
Okay.
And it killed a few fish, which was a concern, but a lot of the fish that died were trash fish, carp, and a few sturgeon. But we were... basically, Fish and Game said we can replace those. It'll take a while, but we can replace them. But the mussel that they were watching that they did find was dead, which is a good sign. So we're crossing our fingers now because they'll go dormant during the winter, basically. But we'll continue to monitor that. ISDA will and Fish and Game, and we'll see what happens next spring. So we're keeping our fingers crossed to make sure that we've got them cleaned out.
So hats off to the governor, hats off to the agencies, but also hats off to those in the legislature who funded the organizations, the agencies, because if they were gutted and were operating on shoestring budgets, they probably wouldn't have been able to respond the way they did.
Right. And like I said, in 2017 or 2000, when I came into the legislature, I think the budget for the invasive species program was $1.2 million or something like that. It was getting its money from boat tags,
Okay.
boat registration. We upped it considerably in 2017, and with the help of several legislators. Sean Keel from North Idaho was the chairman of JFAC at the time. She was instrumental in that effort, and the governor, Governor Otter. And anyway, it's I think it's time for a refresh, and I expect some legislation to come this session to further that fight against the quagga.
It's got to be one of like the most abnormal issues that matters so much. It's one of these things that, why should we care? I think you explained it very well. This is an issue we really all should care about.
We should.
Yeah.
We should.
Another issue that we all should care about that not enough people talk about, but plastered all over, whether it's your campaign websites, whether it's your speeches you give in Boise, you care a lot about personal property rights.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not typically a campaign talking point for a lot of people in Idaho, but that's kind of been something when we talk about you voting with your principles, something that's really important to you. Help us understand, what is it about personal property rights that it's so important to you?
Private property rights and personal property rights are key to what makes this nation what it is. It's key to what makes Idaho, Idaho. And it's just it goes back to the rugged individualism type mentality of, this is mine, I can do with what I want,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't want anybody to come tell me what to do with it. It's private property is like I said, a key to what makes the United States what it is.
Yeah,
country.
and connects so closely with a lot of the other issues you work on with your deep understanding and fight for protecting agriculture and the things they're on. And we're going to have you back just to talk about ag issues.
Okay.
I know there's a long list of things we didn't cover, from everything with the workforce shortage to protecting ag land, and water's an issue for everyone. And so we'll get our time to get into that. But we make sure we ask everyone that comes on the podcast, they get a couple of questions. I don't know if they like them, but people listening tend to love them. So the first question, it's a book you've read in your lifetime that anyone listening, you can say, look, before you die, if you never read anything else again, if you don't even know how to read and you just want to learn how to read, do it for this book and this book alone.
That is a tough question. I am an avid Tom Clancy fan.
Okay. Hey, that's good. We'll take that recommendation.
Okay.
So anything Tom Clancy.
Anything Tom Clancy. I read a lot of Tom Clancy books in college and after, and the words that he uses and that he used, he's deceased now, but my vocabulary went crazy with and I'd have to look up some of the words to see what he meant. But yeah, I'm an avid Tom Clancy fan.
I love it. Now, do you have a place? Now, your seatmate, Representative Wheeler, really struggled with this question because your district is so big. I'm going to hold you to it. Can you pick a place or maybe two that are the best places to eat in your district? If anyone's driving through that massive district of yours, where should they stop and eat?
Home.
Cheryl's cooking?
Yep.
That's a great answer. What does your wife make that when we stop by, we should get?
Roast beef, mashed potatoes.
Man, spoken like a true Idaho country boy. There we go. Senator, we started today talking about your grandparents, your parents, your great-grandfather, Representative McGee, the hard-headed guy from Bonneville County, and talked about how you got introduced into politics. We've covered a lot of issues today, from invasive mussels, personal and private property rights, to issues ag's facing. We've talked a lot about your love of agriculture and how you're fighting to make sure farms can stay in the community. I think everybody in their mind is now wanting to drive out and spend some time in 8 Mile and see what God's creating the earth looks like out there. As we're wrapping up here, you've got 4 boys. These boys have watched you from a young age serve in the Senate. They've watched you feed cows in the winter. They've helped answer the phone when angry people about wolves call. What is it that you're hoping that legacy you're going to leave as Senator Harris for your boys?
I hope that they see the value of public service. If they can't serve in the public, just service in their church, service in their community, service anywhere. We have some phenomenal people in this district. Cheryl and I, for example, went to a Presbyterian bazaar last week, and just great people. It was just fun to be there and intermingle with them and participate in their fundraiser, and that's what I like to do is do those kind of things and see my people. That's why I do it, and I hope that they learn the value of that and follow in those footsteps.
Well, to the level-headed legislator from District 35, we appreciate your service. We appreciate your time. We're going to have you back so we can get through all the other things we didn't cover.
Sounds good.
Thanks so much. We'll let you get home to Cheryl and the cows.
Okay, sounds good.
Thanks so much.